All right, let's get started. So yeah, today we're going to talk about. We're first going to go over garden pests, garden diseases, and garden weeds. And we're not going to get too like in the ditch, in the specifics so much, because like especially on diseases. I don't know a whole lot about this stuff, but I know a lot about like how to like general holistic, how to take care of things, and that's what we're really going to focus on today. Is instead of like figuring, instead of like investigating and treating every little thing that happens in your garden, a lot of the times it's much easier just to do like a holistic approach and make your whole entire, garden a lot, healthy and healthy ecosystem and things like that. So we'll talk a lot about that, but a lot of this is just more like ID. We're going to kind of show you, what kind of pests and diseases and weeds to look for. So we'll start out with garden pests. These are a whole lot of garden pests. We won't be talking about all of these, but some of these probably I've never seen this area. I've never seen like like a Mexican bean beetle and corn ear. I mean, it doesn't mean they're not in this area, but here's a whole bunch. But we're gonna kind of just focus on the ones that you're gonna probably likely see. Especially if you're like growing brassicas, because there's a lot of them out there. So we're going to talk about spring and then summer. We went over a little bit of this before in that calendar class, but I'm going to kind of do, kind of visit this and then talk about a bigger, like I said, holistic approach to dealing with all these different pests. But yeah, right about April, May, we start getting spring pests. I just planted, at the Lederer farm that we're working on, which by the way, we're having a big volunteer day this Saturday, 10 to 2. Would love some help if anyone is interested in coming out. Just send me an email, and I can give you some details. We're going to do lots of like bed, building and broad forking and French drains and stuff. But anyway, between April and May, you start seeing some of these guys out, especially like cabbage looper fly. I've already seen a couple of them. I killed, if you ever see like a white moth, take the time to take them out. Because they're kind of hard to catch, to catch her by your hands. But if you can manage to spray it with a little bit of water, it slows them down and it's really easy to take them, to squish them from then. I killed a couple of them today because they're cabbage looper flies, and what they do is they lay these cabbage looper, they lay little eggs underneath the leaves, and then they love brassicas like kale, collards, cabbage, things like that. And then they sprout, and there's these little green inchworms, and they just like devour the leaves. So that's a good idea if you're growing brassicas. Spend like almost like every day, white when you water, just kind of do a quick little look through your leaves, on the upside and downside, bottom and top of the leaves, just to make because they're really easy. Once you see them, they're really easy to squish. They can get kind of camouflagey, but once you know what to look for, you can identify them pretty easy. Slugs, especially if you're using mulch, you're probably going to get, if you're using a lot of mulch, you're probably going to get some slugs. I still think it's way worth it to use mulch, because slugs are pretty easy to take out. You usually don't see them, during the day. They're usually at night, or they're hanging out in some shaded area. But what you'll see is, something chewing on your leaves. And if there's something's chewing on your leaves and you can't figure out what it is, like you don't see any loopers, or anything like that, you might have some slugs. So a couple things you could do with slugs, go out in the middle of the night in your garden with a headlamp. They'll be out and they're super easy to squish. Put like a big flat rock in the middle of your garden during the day. They'll all hang out underneath that and just flip it over during the day. Or those beer traps actually work really well. They really like the sugars in that beer. So just pour a little beer in a saucer, leave it in your middle of the garden, and there'll be a couple of them floating in that in the morning. Aphids, you'll definitely see. I mean, these guys are everywhere. They're like sap suckers, so they don't chew. What they do is they suck, the sap from the leaf. So a lot of times you'll see it. You'll see different like spots on the leaf, kind of going yellow a little bit, and then you'll see it shiny, because they once they suck the sugars, they kind of they poop out the sugar water, and it's like, and it makes the leaf a little bit shiny. And sometimes you'll see ants actually like to farm, or like I guess herd or whatever aphids, where they'll kind of keep them all in one area, and they'll actually drink all the sugar waters, but they'll also protect them from like ladybugs and stuff. So it's kind of this cool little symbiotic relationship in nature. If you ever see like your leaves look like it was shot by like a shotgun, that's a flea beetle. Um, Really tiny guys, you're not going to be able to squish them. Most of the time, your plant's going to be fine. It's going to outgrow it. Especially it really like eggplant leaves for some reason. So that's why I always recommend, if you're going to buy an eggplant seedling, buy the biggest one you can find. Or if you're growing eggplants, keep it in your greenhouse, or in your whatever, your basement. A couple extra weeks, get a nice decent sized one, because if you do get flea beetles, I mean, a very small one, seedling, they could take out, but like if it's a nice sized plant or whatever, they're not going to kill it. But if you're worried about it, if you start seeing this and you're worried, you can actually get neem oil. Neem oil is a really great, very not so strong, not so harsh, kind of organic sprays from the neem tree, which is a tree in I think India somewhere. It's really good at just like knocking out like really fragile stuff like aphids and stuff, and we'll talk more about neem. It does a bunch of different great things, but neem oil will if you get you can buy a little spray bottle from a garden store, and you can spray it on these leaves, and that will take out the flea beetles. And then leaf miners. So if you see like a cool little pattern, that's actually a little insect that's in between the layers of a leaf, that's actually carving out a little tunnel and eating the leaf as it goes. It's not going to kill the plant. If you do see it, maybe pull the leaf off and throw the leaf in the trash, just so it doesn't go, keep on. It could like it could slow down your plant a little bit. But I've never actually seen a leaf miner take out a plant. Um, so a lot of this is just like finding different ways to hand squish. If you're kind of squeamish, instead of hand squishing, you can get like a little cup of soapy water and just knock these insects into the make sure it's like soapy so they can't like just get out. And then that's another easy way. Or like these little like aphids and stuff, just spraying with a high pressure hose, that will knock them all off, and take care of them as well. So someone says, can you still eat the leaves that pests grow on? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like this, cabbage leader may take a couple bites out of your, collard. You can still eat the collard. It's completely fine. It's sanitary. There's nothing that they have that's going to hurt you. The problem is it won't keep very long. As soon as you harvest it, it's probably going to, rot a lot quicker than like a full one. So yeah, I mean, all this stuff is still good and fine. To eat, as long as you're okay eating it. All right, so then we have another round. Starting around May, June, when things start warming up, we start getting different kinds of pests as well. Some of them, some of these are pretty terrible. Some of them aren't so bad. Like a Japanese beetle. That's kind of like it's kind of like cicadas, like they come out, they grow. If you ever digging in the dirt and you see these white grubs, it's 9 times out of 10 it's a Japanese beetle. I think there's only like 2 white grubs in the area, and both of them are pests. So if you see either squish them or throw them out into like into your yard, and something will eat them. But then they emerge in this cycle, and they only come out for like 30 days, and they'll eat a lot of leaves. They really like fruit tree leaves, in particular. So we'll talk about some different sprays and stuff to take care of them. I've never actually seen them eat too many garden leaves, but they do. I've had them like take out like all the leaves of a fruit tree before. So definitely keep an eye out. You can squish them pretty easy. Or there's this there's this clay spray we'll talk about later. It's an organic spray that you spray all over your plant, and it makes it look like it's like covered in powdered sugar. And sunlight can still get to the plant. It's healthy, but bugs hate it. So when they touch it, they'll immediately fly away. So that's a really great spray if you got Japanese beetle problems. Cucumber beetles, these guys are the worst. I mean, they're so small, they look like ladybugs, but they have yellow instead of red. So if you see these, take the time to kill them. Because again, like, try to spray them to slow them down if you can with some water. Usually I can I can usually, like, if I spend a couple minutes, can take them out. But yeah, they're not as hard as like a moth, but it's still yeah, they're jumpy for sure. But the thing is, they don't do much damage. They'll just take a little bit out of a cucumber, and I think they've yeah, there's probably a couple other plants that they attacked as well. But what you have to be concerned about is they have this like really awful bacterial welt. Not all of them, I don't think, but a lot of them do, where they'll actually inject that wilt into your plant. And if all of a sudden you have a whole cucumber plant that just like welts and dies, that's probably a cucumber beetle. And so there's not a whole lot you can do once they infect your plant. Like wilts are pretty bad. Like they're but one thing you could know if this is more about prevention. If you know you have cucumber beetles, you can I really recommend getting some kind of a pest cloth, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But covering your cucumber beetles or your cucumbers in this row cover, this pest-proof row cover, and then that will keep them from even getting to your plants. So we'll talk about it a little bit. I think somebody say they had a real bad problem at a community garden, so everyone just stopped growing cucumbers for like 2 years.
That was me. That was our community garden. We stopped for 2 years, and so we've been given the go ahead for this year. So we'll see how it goes. We're going to plant cucumbers this year, so we'll
Oh
see
yeah,
how
let
it
me know
goes.
if they come back. I'd be
Yeah.
interested to hear that.
Yep.
But that's a big one too is crop rotation. So we'll talk a lot about crop rotation as well. That's like because these bugs like they know, they're like, oh, I know cucumbers are going to be planted here. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to lay my eggs in the soil. So if you keep on moving them around or even taking a break from certain things, you can they may go somewhere else. But a big one is trying to find their eggs, so definitely, like, once or twice a week, just look under all the leaves if you have time and try to find some eggs, like this is what cucumber beetle eggs look like. And if you can find them before they hatch, you squish them and problem solve. Same with harlequin beetles. If you can find these, their eggs first. So this is a harlequin beetle. It's like really related to a squash bug. They used to be when they first came because they just recently came north because of the warming climate, but when they first came it was pretty bad, but I feel like it's not so bad, but I think it might be a lot of times it's hit or miss. It's just luck whether some bugs come to your garden or not. But if you could find their eggs look like these perfect little kegs. They striped kegs, and they're really easy to kind of squish. And then the little guys are easy, and then the big ones. What really helps with harlequin beetles, I found, is having some kind of trap crops. Like they love sunflowers, so having plant a couple sunflowers outside your garden, and then they'll all kind of hang out there, and then it's really easy to kill them. And then we had the most amazing harlequin beetle trap crop. I cannot remember. It was like some kind of flower that we planted. I'll definitely email it to anybody if anyone's having trouble. But it was like perfect. Like all the harlequin beetles in our entire farm was on these perennial flowers, and it was just so easy to squish them all and like in one morning. So yeah, if you do have yeah, I'll try to remember what that is and email that to people. um but again, like like I mean, they're slow. You can squish them, you can knock them into soapy water. They're really easy to kind of take care of as long as you know stay on top of it. If you let it go for a couple weeks, I mean that's what's problem with community gardens. If there's like one person that lets harlequin beetle infestation go for like a month, and all of a sudden like everyone's got harlequin beetle. So it's definitely something like when you see it, you got take care of it. Don't put that off. White flies, if you ever see, I mean, a lot of times they just look like it's like white fungus, but then they'll when you touch it, you'll have some these little white flies fly around. Like neem oil works really well with them. They usually, I mean, they'll hurt a plant, but I've never really seen them kill a plant. But I mean, I guess if you have enough of them, they could. But yeah, neem oil, even just spraying high pressure water will sometimes take care of these guys. Squash vine borer. We're gonna have we'll show you a whole slide on what to deal with a squash vine borer. But if you ever have like a big section of like a squash plant, just suddenly die, check at the base of the plant. And if you see these little holes, it could be one, two, or three. And that means there's this little maggoty guy that's like just crawling into your squash plant because your squash vines are hollow. So he's just crawling in and eating and causing all kinds of damage. And he will kill the your plant. So you got to do some surgery. Get like a really sharp like box knife and just kind of cut this open until you find them. If there's three holes, you got to find three of them. And then but the only problem is you have this huge wound. So then what the best chance of surviving your plant is it's kind of like 50-50 at that point. But if you don't need to do anything, it's definitely going to die. But you get some like really muddy good soil and kind of shove it in there, and then the hope is that part becomes a root system, a root ball, so you don't have to this big wound on your plant. So Allison says, if I was deciding between the clay spray and the neem oil spray, what are factors to consider? The type of pest. Um, you know, that's a good question. I just don't know enough about all that. Like they definitely have. I really like the kaolin clay spray. I have a slide that kind of talks more about that and give more details. But I like that stuff because well, it doesn't kill anything, but bugs just hate it, so they won't even go anywhere near your plant. You got to spray it like once a month if you have a persistent problem. Most of the time, most of these bugs only come out for a short window. So if you could just spray, for certain things, during that short window, like Japanese beetles, are usually only out for like 30 days. So if you could just, but then like neem is like this kind of this all-in-one spray, and it's not the most effective thing for everything, but it's also it's just a really great organic spray where you're not if you don't want to spray harsh stuff, like you can use it, neem oil for it can help with different kinds of fungicides and bacterial things, and all kinds of like a lot, especially like softer insects and stuff. Like neem probably wouldn't kill a Japanese beetle, anything that's got more of a harder shell. I'm not an expert. This is, but I would say, they're not going to really affect like a squash bug or a Japanese beetle, but for like aphids or smaller things, cucumber beetles, neem works pretty well as well. I use a lot of neem for like aphids, in like greenhouses. Like if I got an aphid outbreak, I'll spray once a week. I'll spray all the plants with some neem oil, and that works really well. Especially like in soft shell insects, uh like aphids, they have that super soft shell, so anything you spray, they're going to absorb it into their body. So that I think neem oil works better with that stuff. But there's a whole bunch of sprays that we'll talk about, like bt is this like organic bacterial thing that you can spray for looper cabbage, for like worms, and loopers, and that works really well. So yeah, I just kind of say I think for the more hardier bugs, I would use kaolin clay. For the softer bugs, I would use neem, or and then for like the worms, I would use BT. But we'll definitely have a slide on sprays, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next bug I want to talk about is tomato hornworms. These guys are really big green, worms. They're pretty easy to identify, pretty easy to just, squish. But if you don't, yeah, if you leave them on your plant, they're going to do some serious damage. But only thing is, I'll show you a slide in a second. If you ever see these little white, kind of like pouches on them, that's actually a parasitic wasp. So that's the only reason you would not want to squish them, because that guy's going to die really soon, and then it's a bunch of parasitic wasps are going to emerge. Really small guys that they don't do anything to humans, but they'll go around and start eating other tomato hornworms. So definitely want to squish them unless you see little egg pouches. I'll show you a picture in a second. Squash bug is the last one. Yeah, again, it's just like squishing them, knocking them in soapy water, try to find their eggs before they, start doing damage. This is what their eggs look like. A lot of times it's like in a little kind of triangle. They have really unique, the beetles have really unique eggs, it's pretty easy to identify. Again, it's just like, once a week, kind of just like look through your plants, especially if you have like just one raised bed or something, a small, definitely take the time to, check out, what's happening on top or bottom of your leaves if you have some time. So treatment. So there's A bunch of different things that we could do that we talked a lot about already. Again, like having a pest walk, once a week, twice a week, just go walk around and look at, through your garden, try to find eggs if you can. Try, squish what you can, knock them in soapy water. Um, and then, yeah, it's definitely with like yeah, yeah, some bugs like stink bugs, you don't want to be careful with squish. Well, you can squish them; they just kind of smell. So that's why when the soapy water kind of really helps that out. But then there's like lots of sprays. So here's a little bit more info on the spray, like the neem oil. Well, it does say like Japanese beetles, but I've never used it for like big stuff. I would say mostly like small things like neem oil works like aphids and larvae and spider mites, white flies. Um, and then like it also works for different kinds of like bacterial blights and things like that. But I mean it's not a very powerful spray, so if you have a really bad, bacteria issue or blight or something happening, it's probably not gonna like save your plant. But it does work really well for like things like aphids and, like I said, soft shell stuff. Um, so definitely, yeah, and definitely check it out. A lot of times they cut it with harsher chemicals and things. I mean, definitely use your judgment, like if you want 100%, or if you want to go, sometimes, yeah, depending on how you feel. Sometimes harsher chemicals can help, but and sometimes it's good to avoid it as well. This is BT Bacilla. I don't know. They're I'm not gonna try to pronounce it. But it's basically it's for caterpillars and worms. It doesn't affect any other insect. It's not. I mean, that's the problem with neem. Neem can affect all different kinds, so it could potentially affect good insects. Like ladybugs maybe or things like that. So that's why you don't just want to spray this all year long. You want to very only when you see things like aphids spray them. But if you have a bunch of ladybugs, maybe don't spray them and let the ladybugs eat the aphids. But yeah, you don't want to just like cover your whole garden with neem. You want to be a little bit selective. I typically usually only use it in greenhouses. But like BT is like I forget the name of it. One's like a direct killer that only is specific targets certain things, and then other ones like a general killer. This is I know that's not the right word, but like a direct killer because it only kills loopers and caterpillars, and you're really not I can't think of any like good ones. So actually this is something you don't have to worry about taking out bad things with or good things with. So you just spray it on your plant, like spray it all over your brassicas if you're having trouble, and then it takes them off. I haven't used it in a while, but I think it kind of like mummifies it, the loopers. But it's some kind of bacteria that just kills them, and it's like organic supposedly. Then kaolin clay, so this is what it looks like when you spray kaolin clay. This is really big on like apple orchards, like organic apples, and they almost always use this because they'll spray it in the spring. They'll put out these bait testers, and when the codling moth, we'll talk more about this in the fruit tree class, but when they start seeing like the codling moth coming, that's that when the worm in the apple thing, that's the codling moth. Then they'll cover their whole orchard with this stuff, and they only have to do it for a couple weeks because the codling moth only comes for a couple weeks and it's just looking for fruit to lay its eggs in. So a lot of times you only have to spray it for a certain period, and then they're gone. But it's great, like even though it looks crazy, it's sunlight still getting in. It's organic, you can actually eat it, but you would want to wash it off, if you're using this. But kaolin clay doesn't kill anything. It's just like so you don't have to worry about killing good bugs. It just makes it so no bug wants to land. They just hate the touch of it, so they'll land on it and immediately fly away. um and then there's a lot of DIY, do-it-yourself sprays, garlic sprays, hot pepper sprays, baking soda. I know like nettle sprays and all these different kinds of vinegar sprays. Just like when you're doing a DIY spray for the first time, test it out on a little bit of your plant first, just make sure you didn't create some thing that's going to burn your plants or something, and then wait a day, and if it seems fine, then you can spray it all over your plant. There's a lot of different like hot pepper for like for like squirrels and things like that. Baking soda stuff for like fungus as fungicides. Tomato sprays. Tomatoes have a lot of they're like nightshade family. family, so they have a lot of toxic stuff in their leaves. You don't want to eat like a tomato leaf, but you could actually turn that into an insecticide, organic insecticide. So all that stuff, like I'm gonna let you all like research it. I think I might have one or two, easy ones to check out. But then high pressure water spray as well. That's great for like aphids and soft body pests. You can just spray them right off, and a lot of times that's enough to kind of like kill them, or at least knock them off, and they're not going to be able to get back. But one of the best things you could do is like attract beneficial bugs. We're going to talk about that in the next section. But there's a lot of bugs out there that will actually just eat. Like ladybugs will just eat all your aphids. So if you have if you have aphids, but you also have ladybugs, you can just kind of sit back and let them do their thing. And then like how do but the thing is like they're not just, and once they eat their ladybugs, if there's no native pollinator plants, they're going to just fly away. So that's why you want to create an ecosystem of like lots of native plants and pollinate flowers and herbs, and that's going to attract these bugs, and then they're going to take care of any pests that you have as they come. And then like pest traps, like beer traps, trap crops and things like that to kind of attract certain, trap crops are nice if you get the right one, and then you just plant it at the edge of your garden, and then all the harlequin beetles go to that one spot, and then you could squish them all really easy. I need to figure out. Yeah, I'll find out what that flower was. It was the most amazing thing. Like it was at our rooftop farm. So it's like a quarter-acre farm, and we just had 2 or 3 of these flowers in the corner, and all the harlequin beetles were on that flower. None of them attacked ate anything in the garden, and it's just like we took them all out in like 1 or 2 mornings. So I'll definitely send that, figure out, find out what that flower was and send to you. Sprayers is a good idea if you're going to use sprayers. I mean, a lot of times you could just buy a lot of these like sprays in, an already spray, thing. But if not, you can just get, a couple dollars for a hand sprayer, a couple more dollars for attach like a hose sprayer thing, maybe like $20 or $30 for a crank sprayer. And then if you got a big garden or big orchard, you should think about one of these backpacks. They're like $40 or $50, but if you have a big area, they're going to make your life so much easier. But Oh, and squash borer. So we talked a little bit about the squash borer, but yeah, if you see like a whole section of squash die, check on the base. If there's holes, get like a sharp knife or box cutter. Slowly, kind of carefully slit it open until you find the maggots, squish them, and then all the wounds cover that with wet dirt. And the hope is like that will turn into root ball instead of just dying. Like I said, it's like 50-50. I've saved a couple of plants. I've definitely killed a couple of plants this way. But if once they're in there, they're going to kill your plant if you don't do anything. You can try to find these bugs. I've never actually seen a fly before. But yeah, I mean, if you see one of these, crazy looking flies, try to take them out if you can. Spray them first with some water, slow them down. Then some people have some success if you know you have squash borers in the area. Like if you had some last year, some people have had some success with wrapping aluminum foil at the base, because that way they can't get into that base and lay their eggs. Also row covers help out a lot. If you have squash borers, if you had them last year, think about covering your squash with row covers, at least long enough until like they start getting big enough, because then these guys are only around trying to lay their eggs for a short amount period of time. So if you could make it through late spring, early June, early summer, then you're usually fine. And then prevention. So this is actually I was talking about, these are actually aphid ant farmers. It's so cool. I've seen this a couple times. They'll just corral all the aphids into this little branch, and then they'll literally just suck the sugar water straight as it's coming out of the aphids butts. And then that's what the ants survive on. But at the same time, they'll protect them from ladybugs. As ladybugs are trying to eat the aphids, the ants will actually protect them. So it's a pretty cool. It's a Pixar movie waiting to happen. Yeah. And then, what we talked about prevention. So we just talked about treatment, but ideally you want to really you want to put most of your effort and attention to prevention. And prevention is just just about creating is really just about creating the most healthy garden you can, because a lot of these pests and diseases they're more attracted to unhealthy plants. As long as you keep everything healthy, you keep a nice ecosystem, you're going to really reduce your chances of getting pests and diseases. So big one is like water your soil, not your plant. I mean, sometimes you just gotta water everything if you just got a hose and a sprayer. But if you have drip, or if there's like as the plants are small, try to water the soil as much as possible. Because when you water the plants, especially at like night, if you have to do some night waterings, which is not the worst thing in the world, but you just don't want to do it like every night, because then you're going to have all these fungal issues and weak plants, and then pests are going to come. But if you can use like drip or something like that, or just water during the day, and then the leaves are going to dry out, so you don't have to worry about that. Not a huge deal, but just something to think about. You don't want to water every night, basically. um, and then try to build healthy biology in your soil, using like adding compost, adding compost tea. We're gonna watch the video on how to make compost tea on this class, and avoid using like miracle grow fertilizers and stuff. Anything with really high nitrogen, you're going to have a lot of unhealthy growth. um, and then like basically the plant, the top of the plant outgrows the root systems, and then you start getting this unhealthy growth. It's almost all vegetative, there's not much fruit, and then it just becomes unhealthy, and then it's pests are attracted to that. So that's why you want to use slow release compost and compost teas and stuff, as opposed to high or inorganic or fertilizers. You get ensuring proper drainage. If you have bad drainage, you're gonna have unhealthy plants, and you're gonna have fungus issues and things like that. So definitely make sure. You have decent drainage, or if you don't, go up. Build raised beds and things like that. A lot of times, selecting what your varieties are. If you've had a issue with diseases, a certain kind of disease, like a certain like bacterial wilt, then you can actually find like tomatoes that are resistant to bacterial wilt. So plan ahead. Like if you've had issues, the year before, remember that when you start ordering your seeds, and try to find certain varieties that are bred to be resistant. Crop rotation, polycultures. You don't just want to plant all one crop. We want a lot, we want to create an ecosystem. A quarter of your garden is full of garden flowers and herbs. Circulation is huge. Trellising, get things off the ground. Have circulation, prune your tomatoes. Have proper spacing and things like that. Mulch helps a lot. A lot of times, there's a lot of diseases, especially for tomatoes. There's a lot of diseases in the soil. So when it rains, it's just splashing these diseases up on your plants. So that's why it's nice to have like a layer of mulch. And not only that, it keeps a more consistent moisture level. You have to water less. It's just it's going to have a much healthier garden with mulch. And then, like I said, like just get in the routine to check for weeds, check for diseases, and if you see diseases, cut it out your garden as soon as possible. Do pest issues and things. And then like what we call sanitation. So just remove anything that's diseased, dying, anything that looks unhealthy, or like or like crops that are bolted. Like if you have your brassicas, once they bolt, remember to cut the bolts off, because they're really delicious. But then remove the plant, because it's going to get weaker and weaker, and then that's going to be a point where it's going to start attracting different things. Same with like fruits that fall on the ground. Don't let them just rot. Pick them up and compost them or things like that. So um, but and then we talked already a lot about row covers, but like I said, I wouldn't use row covers unless unless the year before you had a specific problems with this specific insects. And then think about that. You have the floating covers that you just throw over your small plants and weigh it down with rocks. And then you have like the hoops if you want to actually grow tall plants and keep them protected. But you do like when they start flowering, you do need to pull the landscape fabric off, so pollinators can pollinate it. Yeah. And you want to use like a pest cover or a summer cover, because they have different thicknesses, and some of them are they're too thick. They're going to overheat your plants in the summer. They're made to actually keep heat in during the winter. So make sure you get a summer crop or cover or pest cover. Crop rotation, we talked a lot about this already, but just doing like a 4-year rotation where you have all your crops on one, you divide them by, your families or by, different types. And then have root crops, having all your like, tomatoes in one spot and then move that, different spot on a 4-year rotation. So if you do have like tomato hornworms and they're going to, want to plant their eggs in the base of this, but then when they hatch, your tomatoes are going to be on the other side of the garden. And that hopefully that's far enough where they can't get to it. They die before they get to it. So just, but like I said, a lot of people just have a small, like if you just have a raised bed, don't worry about 4-year rotation. Mainly just try to plant things in a different spot every year, or even if it's just going back and forth, like dividing your garden in half and just like switching that half every year, is enough, if that's all you can. And then we talked about, putting all your crops, especially brassicas, putting all your brassicas together and then moving all the whole family every year instead of just like spreading them out and having, insects all over the place. Companion plants. So there's a lot of companion plants. We're going to talk more about companion plants in another class. I think the fruit tree class, but there's some really great, deterrent ones. Like nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are really great. A lot of like flies and things hate the smell of nasturtiums, so they'll stay away. So planting those around your garden, on the edges of your garden. Tansies keep away Japanese beetles. Alliums and different like garlics and stuff, and chives will keep away different, like root-eating nematodes and stuff. So having, just planting these around, having like I said, like trying to leave at least a quarter of your garden for like herbs and flowers and stuff. That will be, help attract, um, will help keep away certain bugs and then attract certain, healthier ones that will eat the bad bugs. So like I said, yeah, quarter of your garden at least flowers and herbs, native, producing nectar plants. Sometimes letting your herbs flower like dill and stuff, or basil. If you let it go to the flower, a few of them, they're great, pollinator plants that will attract different kinds of insects that will, yeah, I mean, because basically you don't want to get away from this monoculture that has no biology and has to be sprayed with tons of chemicals, and you want some kind of the beautiful ecosystem that's going to have this natural system that maybe that's going to like maybe they won't kill all, the ladybugs won't eat all your aphids, but they eat enough to the point where they won't be a problem, for you anymore. And then beneficials. So here's a question: do all herbs attract beneficial insects, or are some types best? That's a good question. Well, I mean, all herbs that will like flower. I mean, you want things that flower. So because what attracts them is the nectar in their flowers. Because like aphid, ladybugs love eating aphids, but then when they're done with aphids, they're going to want some nectar. And if you have some nectar, then they're going to be like super happy, and then they're going to have babies, and then you're going to have tons of ladybugs in your area. So as long get things that you want to flower. That's why some herbs, when they do flower, they attract well. Like dill. Dill is amazing, at attracting, beneficial insects, and probably better than other things, but I always plant, some dill in the spring and let it go to flower during the summer. But these are some plants I know work really well. Attract, marigolds, cosmos, sunflowers, black eye Susans, nasturtiums. Yeah, they're definitely ones that if you go native, you're probably not, it's probably going to attract something. So Adam says we have a bee friendly front yard, but our food is growing in the backyard. Yeah, I don't know, like the range on that stuff. So yeah, that's a good question. I would still probably plant a couple of those, bee friendly plants in the backyard as well. But I mean, maybe it might be close enough. All right, let's talk about beneficial. So yeah, this is my favorite chapter. It's all about bugs that eat other bad bugs. So that's when we call it beneficials. We mean beneficial insects that basically eat the bad bugs. So here's a couple of them like aphid midge and hoverfly. They're really good at eating aphids, but really hands down, it's the ladybug. And not just like the adult ladybug, definitely like the larva stage is when it's like the most ferocious. Yeah, but adult ladybugs, and especially these larvae, if you see any of these stages, it's important to understand. I mean, honestly, I didn't know what these were until a couple years ago, so definitely want to, yeah, if you see, especially a larva at this stage, they just like, I mean, they'll eat so many aphids that, I mean, if you have a couple larvae, you won't have aphid issues. And then you'll have also some of these eggs, so you as well. So when you're doing egg checks, like sometimes eggs look, kind of similar. Like I think these kind of look like cucumber beetle eggs. um so you want to be able to identify. So if you're not quite sure, take a picture, Google it. I want to show you like a University of Maryland has like a pest thing that you could send them a photo. I'll show you a link in a second. Yeah, so you want to make sure, because you don't want to like, there's some good eggs out there, like especially ladybugs. You don't want to destroy their eggs. So it's definitely, if you see anything that's yellow and looks like this, it might be a good idea to at least take a picture and research it, before you squish it. Um, but here's another picture of a, ladybug and an ant, facing off. But yeah, ladybugs, amazing. Definitely want some ladybugs. So you can actually buy ladybugs. You could buy like 100 of them in a little container. And it's actually a really fun activity. You can have kids spread them around your garden. You got to release them right at right when the sun's going down. But again, if you don't have, a bunch of nectar producing plants and native plants, they're just going to fly away. So it's just like waste of $20. So definitely want to have some ecosystem before you buy them. And a lot of times, if you have an ecosystem, you don't have to buy them. They'll come to you. So then you have what's called general killers. So there's a bunch of them out there. Praying mantis, you just want to be careful because there's a lot of invasive praying mantises. I'll show you a picture of the invasive ones in a second. But there is one native praying mantis, the Carolina one, and this is what they look like, and this is their egg sac. They will eat anything. So they yeah do a really great job, taking out. If you have a lot of bad insects, they'll take them, take them out. Assassin bugs, damsel bugs, tachin fly, lacewing. But lacewing, hands down, lacewings are like some of the best ones. These are actually like professional greenhouses will actually order lacewings because they're such good, killers of like, everything. But the lacewing itself, I think it's one of those bugs that doesn't have a mouth. They just reproduce and die. But then they make these little eggs. You've ever seen the eggs like hanging off like a string? Do not squish them. Those are lacewings. You definitely want those. And then they come out in this ferocious looking larva that just like eats everything. It's a really amazing beneficial insect. So something like, yeah, the iNaturalist app is a great resource for identifying insects and perhaps eggs too. Definitely, yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So iNaturalist app is amazing app where you can actually, it's a whole community of people that you can post photos and can get opinions and second opinions, and there's like a handful of of really amazing experts on there that may weigh in as well. So definitely, yeah, there's oh yeah, thank you for mentioning that. iNaturalist is an awesome app. All right, so these are the invasive mantis eggs that you need to look out for, and why. And reason why this is literally an invasive praying mantis eating a hummingbird. They just eat everything, so you really want to be careful. We only want the Carolina. That's it's pretty clear. I mean, when you really look at this, you can kind of tell. These, I don't know, yeah, these have all kind of unique structures. So if you have one of these egg sacs, definitely pull up the slide and make sure it's a Carolina. If it's not a Carolina, you should destroy it because it's literally going to eat hummingbirds. So, but um, and then you have caterpillar wasps. So these are the parasitic wasps that I was talking about. So if you have one of these like tomato hornworms and it has these little white pouches on top, leave it be, because that guy will be dead in like a day or so. What happens is these are eggs, and when they hatch, they literally go inside the insect, eat them from the inside out, and then pop out. That's why I heard rumor, that's where like that alien movie, the lunch scene where they're all eating lunch and suddenly alien pops out the guy's chest. And that's what I heard the inspiration came from from this. And they're super small wasps. They don't hurt people at all. You probably don't even you won't even see them. They're so small and fast. But I mean, they'll take out moths, cabbage worms, hornworms, corn borers, armyworms, all aphids, all different kinds of things. So you definitely want, if you have one of these, that means you're going to have like 10, parasitic wasps flying all over your garden. And it's going to lay more eggs as well. So, and then ground beetles are fantastic, beneficial bugs. So if you have, again, like Japanese beetle, bad. If you see Japanese beetle, squish them, or knock them in soapy water, or whatever. Kill the grubs. But most beetles are really beneficial. Like especially these ground beetles. They will eat all kinds of animals. They eat slugs. They eat snails. Cabbage loopers. Yeah, they'll eat a lot, and they can live for several years. So definitely, if you see one of these, check it out. And they love like perennial stuff. They make habitats into places that haven't been disturbed for a while. So that's why it's good to have like having perennial beds, with plants that aren't going to be planted and replanted. Having like a perennial spot that's going to attract things like ground beetles. And then there's lots of other beneficials, from chickens to like a lot of farms will let their chickens run around their garden and just eat. I mean, they just eat up all different any kind of insect they see. Birds, dragonflies are fantastic. Dragonflies is a great sign that you have an ecosystem because they're like kind of the top of the insect chain. So if you see a dragonfly, that means you're doing something right. Centipedes, millipedes, spiders, and bats as well. I have a whole bunch of bat boxes that someone got and then at DPR and left. So if anyone wants to try out some bat boxes, send me an email. All right, garden diseases. All right, so we'll start out. So this is definitely like kind of more of a weaker spot for me. So I'm just going to talk about more. This is more about kind of IDing things. I'll talk about some simple solutions and stuff. But a lot of this stuff is like, you need to kind of research yourself as well. But like a powdery mildew is a really common one. It's the fungal disease. You get it a lot when there's like high humidity, especially when you're not doing when you don't have a whole lot of circulation in your garden. So that's a good idea. That's why you want to get things trellis. That's why you want to prune things like tomatoes. So you have like, have nice circulation and sunlight. If you plant things too close together, you may get more, better chance of getting powdery mildew and different fungal issues. So, main thing is just like circulation and sunlight, water practices. Like, again, don't water at night it's all right every once in a while, but don't make it a habit of watering at night. Or you're going to get some fungal issues unless you're using like drip irrigation. And then this is where like neem helps, compost tea, any kind of like fungicide will help treat it. But most of the time, I mean, powdery mildew is not too bad. It usually doesn't kill the plant. I mean, it will slow it down a little bit, but it usually doesn't kill the plant. But downing mildew, that could be much more harmful. So like powdery mildew you find on the top of the leaves and it's like more whitish. Downing mildew you find them usually on the bottom of the leaves, and it's more kind of a darker fungal time, and it can really spread oftentimes when you get a lot of rain. That's when it can spread around your garden. So that you want to definitely monitor. And if you see downing mildew, like I would just go ahead and remove the leaf and throw it in the trash, and then just keep an eye on. And if you see any more infection, kind of remove that. I mean, you could try to, you could spray fungicides and stuff like that, but it's definitely more serious than powdery mildew. So sometimes it's just good to just remove the infected leaf or even the affected plant if you got enough plants to spare. Leaf spot, I mean, there's like a million different ways why you have like any spots on your leaves. Most of the time it's not a big deal. Most of the time you could still eat the if like you see a lot in like chard and stuff like that, you can still eat it, it's fine. A lot of times it's just some kind of bacterial or fungal thing that it won't usually doesn't kill the plant. It's usually still edible. If it gets real bad, you just start, the best thing is just remove the infected part. If the thing is like it could be bacterial or it could be fungal. So if you could properly identify it, then you could treat it. But if not, I would just like remove the leaf, infected part. Early blight. Everyone has early blight on tomatoes. It's like it's in all the soil. It's basically when you see like the bottom, leaves of your tomato plant start to yellow. That's because it's on the bottom. It's closer to the soil, and when it rains, it splashes that soil. And most soil, like a lot of tomato diseases and blights, they live in the soil. So that's where you get that, that yellow stuff. So I mean, I would just pull it off. A lot of people just leave it, but I go ahead. I'll pull it off just so it doesn't spread anymore. And I usually throw it in the trash unless I know I have really good hot compost pile. But I mean, it's just not worth it. I would just throw it in the trash so you don't end up spreading it anymore. And I usually don't see it on fruits and stuff like that, but apparently it can be on fruits. But yeah, early blight, it's not going to kill your tomatoes. Not that big. It's not that serious. I mean, but it will maybe slow your tomato down a little bit. So it's a good idea just to remove those leaves. But then late blight is much more serious. So if you have late blight, you just want to throw that whole tomato away because it's less common than early blight. But it's like when you see like these huge chunks of your tomato plant, turn brown like this. I mean, you could, I would maybe like properly, send a photo iNaturalist or to the University of Maryland plant diagnosis place, which I'll show you a link. And you could try identify it. But if it comes back late blight, you just want to rip that plant out as soon as possible and throw it in the trash. Late blight. This is actually what caused the Irish potato famine. It's the same kind of disease that attacks tomatoes and potatoes, and like I mean that just devastated the entire countries. Lost like most of their potatoes. I mean that's how like contagious this is. That's why if you do identify it, you want to get rid of it. But I've never actually ever seen it. I mean I'm sure it's out there in DC somewhere, but I've never seen it. So it's not very common, but it's something that if you got if you're getting these spots that giant spots that turn brown on your plant, and it's still like and it's not like November, where it should naturally, be decomposing. And definitely, spend some time researching it. And if you think it is, remove it. Don't compost it. It's definitely not worth it. Then tobacco mosaic virus, which is a real beautiful virus, but this is actually a virus that comes from tobacco and actually survives tobacco. And then if you, this is why you don't want, if you have any smokers in your family, keep them away from your tomatoes. Cause literally like, you can't really, you don't know if that the virus will survive the whole, curing process and that stuff. So you don't know if a cigarette, has, this virus in it or not. There's a potential that any cigarette, could have this virus. So if someone's smoking it, and then they have that virus on their hands, and then they go and check your tomato, and then all of a sudden your tomato looks like this, that's the tobacco mosaic virus, and it's pretty serious. You want to just, if you ever see that, just remove the whole plant, trash it, don't compost it. Yeah, keep smokers out of your garden. Fusarium welts, it's a fungal disease. I don't know too much about welts, to be honest, but if you ever, I mean, I just know if your tomato plant starts wilting in like November, that's okay. But if it starts wilting in like July or August, you probably have some kind of bad wilt or blight, and it's a good idea to kind of remove the whole plant. Sometimes it's not that, sometimes you could just remove the section. If it's just like a little section that's wilting, just cut out the whole section. But if it's like all over your plant, you just want to remove your whole plant just so it doesn't spread. um, and anthracnose. Anthracnose is this giant umbrella term that lots of different, things like fungal issues, affects all different kinds of plants like dogwoods and stuff like that. But it does affect, some of your nightshade plants, like the eggplants and peppers and potatoes. And it's basically you get these dots on them. It's not that serious for vegetables. It can be pretty serious. It's pretty serious for like some other things like dogwoods. It can, they're having an issue. But like yeah, if you get these like dark indication, indents and stuff, it spreads through wet conditions. Again, a lot of this stuff, all this fungal stuff, like the best thing to do is just like make sure get everything off the ground, trellis things, and then prune things, and let don't plant too close together, circulate, thin out. If you do, I mean it's all right. I mean every once in a while I do plant too closely, and you just gotta thin those plants out or transplant them. But that's the best thing. Yeah, again, don't compost these things. I don't think this will necessarily kill your plants. But yeah, definitely want to cut out the infected parts and throw it in the trash. bacterial welts. This is from the cucumber beetle. So if you have a cucumber plant, it just suddenly looks like this. Supposedly, to tell for sure, you can pull it apart, and if there's like actual slime in it, that's from a bacterial wilt part. But yeah, the best thing to do is just like kill these guys when you see them, spray them to slow them down with some water, and then if you know you have cucumber beetles, think about row covers, the next year, just to keep them, from coming back. And then like nutritional deficiencies, you could just you could just have a all kinds of rabbit YouTube rabbit holes on this one. So I'm just going to go over a couple really brief ones. Like, so this thing called I can never say this right, chlorosis. That is basically any part of your plant turns yellow. But there's just so many different reasons why that could happen. These are kind of general ones. If you do see a part of your plant turning yellow, I would run to this list really quickly. Like, do you have poor drainage? Have you had people walking in your garden recently, and maybe they compacted something in your garden, and now a part of your plant, the roots are compacted, is turning yellow? So that's usually like number one. That's really easy. So if that happens, get a pitchfork, just kind of loosen that soil up without digging it up. Damaged roots, pH. If you haven't tested your pH and all your plants are turning yellow, it'd be a good idea. Because you can get pH tests. Those are really easy. You don't need to go out to the lab. You can get these little, $5 tests from Home Depot. It could be a pathogen, a pest, a contamination. Maybe, someone spilled some like gasoline, close by or something like that, or you're having some runoff from a road. It could also just be nutrient deficiencies. And then there's a couple of different things to think about. If you have young new leaves turning yellow, but the old ones stay green, that's an iron deficiency. And you can actually get some powder iron, mix it with some water, and you can actually add iron to your soil. Sometimes it's like there's iron in your soil, it's just not accessible because of pH or different things. But if you have old stuff turning yellow, the big leaves, that could be a nitrogen, magnesium, different things like that. Um, so again, like tons of rabbit holes, but yeah, I mean, there's like nitrogen deficiencies. You get like the bottom leaves start turning yellow. So nitrogen makes the leafy vegetable growth. So NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So phosphorus, is really good for like blooms and for the roots. So if you're having trouble getting flowers on your plants, maybe think about getting some, organic phosphorus, from like bone meal or rock phosphate or something. So if you have a phosphorus deficiency, it's like super purple. Potassium deficiency, so potassium is really good at like fruit development. So if you're having like fruit issues, or if you're having these weird looking like crazy patterns, that could be a potassium. So maybe you want some kelp meal, things like that. A lot of times, if you don't want to like just deal with all this, again, I keep on selling this, but fish and seaweed fertilizer. It's got all different kinds of, it's got all the macro and micronutrients. And it's just, so if you think it's a nutrient deficiency, maybe just to get like one of these general organic ones, fertilize, and then see if it, and things get better in a week or so. But if you want, or you can be, you could be a plant investigator and try to find out exactly what's messing with your plants. But yeah, I don't have the patience for that. I mean, you can see like all these different, yeah, it's just, it's a lot. If you're into that, great. This is a great chart to kind of help you. But if you're not into it, Neptune's Harvest. Blossom and rot. So that's another one where if you ever had like a fruit, and then like the end, gets like rotty. It maybe you see it a lot with squash or tomatoes. That's actually a calcium deficiency. A lot of times it's not because your soil doesn't have calcium. It's just like your plants, something stopping your plants from absorbing that calcium. Which a lot of times is just like inconsistent moisture levels, and you just mulch, that will help it out. If you avoid high fertilize really high nitrogen, like Miracle-Gro stuff will just kind of overwhelm the plant, and then makes it hard to suck up other things. Best thing is just use a mulch, and add compost every year, and keep your soil healthy. But if you do have this and you want to treat it, I think that one of the best treatments is actually get some eggshells, crush them up, let them seep in like in a cup of water for a day, and then actually pour that into a watering can and then water your garden. That would be that's a lot of calcium you're injecting. And you could even take the eggshells. If you have eggshells, just you can actually crumple them up and mix them into your soil. That's more of a slow release. But if you want a quick release, let them seep in water, and then that water has is full of calcium. Um, All right, prevention, same thing, keep on pushing this. I won't go through all this stuff, but all this stuff works just as well for diseases as it does insects. Crop rotation, just as important for diseases, probably even, I'd say even more important for diseases. Like if you have tomato diseases, that's going to probably stay in the soil. That's why they do a 4-year rotation, because they figured out that's enough the most years you have to wait to for diseases to die in a soil, as long as they don't have new hosts. So if you have a really bad tomato diseases, plant them in a new spot so they don't get the same diseases every year. um, Garden sanitation, when you see disease stuff, cut it out. If you see bad plants and sick plants, either cut out the bad part or to remove the whole plant. Don't just let it, deteriorate into your garden, because then it's going to, be a vector for more diseases and insects and things. Mycorrhizae is really amazing. It's like this symbiotic fungal fungus that actually attaches to different root systems, and then they feed off what we call exudates. So all plants, they suck in a lot of carbon from the air, and then they use some of it to grow, and then they release the rest of it as sugars into the soil, and that feeds your biology in your soil, including your mycorrhizae. Your mycorrhizae loves it so much they'll actually in exchange they'll offer more nutrients and water and stuff. So it has this like symbiotic relationship. And then people have claimed, there's a lot of research on it, that it's actually somewhat intelligent fungus, for they'll actually connect multiple different plants, and they'll detect when there's deficiencies in different plants, or issues, and then send the nutrients that plant needs to fight it off. So I don't know. I haven't really looked at the research, but I mean, people love this stuff. So you can actually buy it as a powder, or I didn't tell you this, but you can go to like a really healthy forest, and just get a little cup of like really healthy soil, and I guarantee there's mycorrhizae in that, and then mix that up in your backfill, and then mix that into your garden, and that will inoculate your garden. But just a heads up, you're not supposed to, most like national forests and stuff like Rock Creek, you're not supposed to take anything from it. So if you get caught, you're gonna get a ticket. But it's up to you. And then, like I said, pruning to, get your, don't let your tomato grow on the ground. It's just going to have all kinds of diseases. Get it up, on trellis it, and then prune it. The first, yellow leaves that you see, prune, remove all the bottom branches, because they're just going to grow out and grow on the ground, and bring diseases up to your plant. And then pull out these suckers, so you actually have circulation, so you don't have a lot of fungal issues on your tomatoes. But we talked a lot about pruning tomatoes already, so I won't spend too much time on that. But yeah, spend like, once a week at least, pulling suckers. Get them while they're small, so you can just pull them out. If they're big, you want to get some pruners. Yeah, trellises, we already talked a lot about this, but get things off the ground as much as possible. Not only does that save space and allows you to grow more plants, it actually allows you to grow healthier plants. Fertilizers, try to use organic versus inorganic. Inorganic just produces a lot of unhealthy growth, a lot of vegetative growth versus fruiting, and then you just have like sick plants that attract pests and diseases, as opposed to all these organic things that we've already talked about. Are I won't go through all of them, but like compost, just make sure put healthy compost in every year. That's just so much nutrients and also biology that's going to help your garden out. Thinning, we talked about thinning, but if you a lot of people, you plant, if you find you planted too closely, I mean, there's definitely, you can play with the spaces at some, but I mean, if you've got a lot of plants planted too closely, thin them out. You can either cut them or actually transplant them around your garden. But yeah, if you have like too many things growing together, you're going to have some fungal issues and things like that. And then treatments. So again, some sprays. These are all organic, FDA approved, organic, OMRI, whatever, organic something. This is, yeah, I forget what it means, but but they're also pretty harsh. I wouldn't use any of these sprays unless you kind of know what you're doing, like copper and sulfur and perithian. Sometimes, you'll get neem that's cut with some of these things. So just be aware. Sometimes maybe you do want it, if you're having really bad issues, but then you have some safer organic treatments like neem for sure. Root shield if you're having a lot of like issues with root systems and stuff, which is kind of hard to detect. A lot of times plants will just wilt, when they have root issues, like from root eating nematodes. Not all nematodes are bad, but some of them do eat roots or different like funguses in the soils and stuff. That kind of goes beyond my knowledge, to be honest. But just something, if you ever think you do have that, research root shield. It's a really great organic spray for that stuff. And then DIY sprays, compost tea is fantastic. Compost tea is like a probiotic spray. I'm gonna show you a video in a second of how to make compost tea, but it's just a probiotic. It takes all that healthy biology of that compost, and then you just kind of blow it up into this water, and then you spray your plant, you spray your soil, and all of a sudden it's covered in this like awesome, uh, beneficial bacteria. So when bad bacteria and things come, they have to actually fight and compete against the good bacteria. So compost tea for sure. There's a lot of natural fungicides like horsetail and garlic. You can make different sprays if you research. This is like a basic, baking soda is like a fungicide, or a vinegar is also. The basic one is you get some kind of like fungicide like baking soda or a vinegar that's going to kill fungus. You mix it with some kind of like thick stuff like either citrus oils or Dr. Bronner's soap, so it actually stays on the plant, and then mix it with some water. And like I said, but you want to like test a little corner of the plant first, and because I've definitely made some really hard, I've not followed recipes and made some really harsh stuff. And you don't want to, if you accidentally make it something harsh, you don't want to spray it all in your whole garden. And then if you know you have bad stuff in your soil, you can definitely lay out some plastic and just kind of bake your soil in the summer. For like 1 or 2 months, or or if you have containers, you can actually bring your containers into your oven. You can actually bake your soil. When it's done, it's going to have no biology when it comes out. So then you want to add some compost or compost tea and get the biology back, but it'll kill everything in there. All right, so I'm gonna play a quick little video on how to make compost tea.
Hi, I'm Allie Reynolds with Allie's Organics, and today I'm going to show you how to make really good compost tea. We need to have some mesh, just some fabric mesh, and some compost, of course. This is just some compost from my compost bin. And we're just going to put it in there, and I'm just going to tie it, just to hold it in there. And then I'm going to put it in a 5-gallon bucket of just plain old good clear water. Secure it in there somehow. And to this, I am going to have a regular old fish pump here with some hose and just that fish line that bubbles in your fish tank. And this is actually one that I purchased, but you could also just create one on your own, just with a circle, or you can just even have some of the little bubblers that they use in the fish aquariums. Just put that down in there. What this is going to do, it's going to percolate it so you don't have to stir it. And I also like to add some molasses in there. It really helps feed the microorganisms in there. Like 2 or 3 tablespoons is all. This is what you want to see. You want to see the bubbles in here. You want to see it percolating. You know it's working then. But if it rises to the top, then you just simply want to put a rock on it just to help hold it down. And that way you'll get more movement from the bottom up, and that's what you want to see. Compost tea is a really good way to feed plants. It's just an organic plant fertilizer. You can use this, you can pour it straight around the roots. If you want to use this tea to squirt onto your plants, you will probably need to strain it out a little bit better. And you'll also want to dilute it. This tea will sit here and percolate for about 3 days. I want to keep a cover on it, but we don't want the cover on tight. We want to be able to have the air get in there. At the end of 3 days, we can take this out and we can use this tea. Like I said, you can just use it on just about any plant. I don't like to use it on seedlings though, because if you get it too strong, then you have a tendency to kill them. So just stick with your outdoor growing. That's the best way to go.
All right. So definitely, some people don't percolate it for a whole 3 days. Some people only do like a day or two. Some people actually do it in inorganic, and anaerobic ways without the bubbler as well, which I don't really understand. But yeah, and also if you do want to use it on seedlings, definitely just like dilute it. Like maybe like add a lot of water. I don't use it on seedlings, but yeah, you definitely want to dilute it if you do. And then also definitely strain it. Get like she said, strain it before, so you don't have like chunks of compost that get clogged up your sprayers. It's a really amazing stuff, and you don't especially if you have bad soil. It's a great way to add biology to your soil, and you don't have to do it every year. You just got to do it once, and as long as you keep that soil healthy, and that biology will remain. But it works really well for like different kinds of fungal issues and bacterial issues as well. So this is the University of Maryland Plant Diagnostic Laboratory. You can email them anything you're not sure about, and they will try to help you. It's pretty great. Um, I think there was a question. So you can spray the compost tea on plants or just soil. So you can do both. If you spray it on the soil, it'll help create some great biology in your soil, and the healthier soil is, like the healthier plant is. But you can also spray it on your plants, and then that will create this like probiotic layer, where if you do get like fungal issues or bacteria, they actually have to fight all this beneficial bacteria. Um, or if you want to use it as a treatment, a lot of times it works better as a preventative. Same with neem, works better as a preventative. But if you do have some like powdery mildew or something like that, you could spray some compost tea. As long as it's not too bad, it will help out somewhat. So someone says, why would you use compost tea and not just add compost to your soil? For sure. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. So, but the compost tea is really concentrated. So, and it's easier, I guess. If you have a big area, big garden, um, it's an easy way because you only need a little bit of compost, and you can make this, a whole bunch of spray from a little bit of compost. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as adding a lot of compost to your garden as well. But yeah, definitely, as a foliar spray, like spraying on the plant, it's definitely works a lot better. It works really well. But yeah, for your soil, I mean, it's really up to you. I mean, yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you could probably accomplish the same goal as long with compost, as long as you have enough compost. The only way, yeah, the only reason why I would see not using it is maybe you don't have enough. You have a big area and you can't afford compost, so might as well just spray it with compost tea. All right, last section that we're gonna do is garden weeds. Let's see how much time we have. Okay, yeah, we should have plenty of time. So, um, we'll start out with perennial weeds. So we're just going to kind of do some basic ID on garden weeds, just to like most people, dandelion, most people have seen this. Could be a weed. It can definitely outcompete any of your plants in the area. At the same time, it's edible. It's actually really nutritious. It can be kind of bitter. You want to harvest it in the spring before it blooms. And then there's like it's really like meaty area right in the middle of the plant is like really delicious, kind of tender area. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, they can also be, a lot of people hate dandelions. They could be pretty bad invasive because they have a deep tap root. So you have to get, like you have to dig pretty deep to get it out. Because if you pull out and there's still a little bit of tap root left, it's just going to regrow itself. Thistle, pretty easy to remove if you can find it. Definitely wear gloves. Yeah, a lot of this stuff I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm just kind of showing you. These are common weeds in the area. Chickweed. Chickweed's another. I know a lot about edible plants, edible weeds. So the chickweed's an edible spring one. You can make a lot of people make pesto out of it. It's got like kind of a grassy kind of taste, I think, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But some people really love it. But chickweed, I mean, yeah, chickweed's really easy to pull. It's not, like I said, some people actually leave some of it there so they can eat it. Horse nettle, a pretty bad one, because it's got all these spikes. You definitely want to be careful. Wear some gloves when you pull them. You know, in the fall, as you can see the berries, they're pretty, distinguishable. But basically, any kind of plant that looks a little bit, crazy and then has giant spikes underneath them. That's probably a horse nettle. So get rid of that guy. Um, Poison ivy is really important. Yeah, everyone should know what poison ivy looks like nowadays. But definitely, uh how I kind of identify it is I pretend like the bottom leaves are mittens. And then like these are the thumbs of the mittens. So it's like two mittens. They're kind of side by side. And that helps me identify poison ivy really quickly. But it's like that leaves of three. Especially even in the winter, those red, it'll have like red hairy vines. Stay away from any kind of red hairy vines. Pokeweed, you see this grow all over. For the most part, it's poisonous. A lot of people though grew up, drinking pokeweed, wine, and eating different kinds of pokeweed. There's certain parts of the plant you can eat. If you don't know what you're doing, and I don't try to eat pokeweed. For sure, there's certain parts that are super toxic, as well, and will really mess you up. So, yeah, just beware. But definitely, they'll get huge, so you want to pull these really quickly, or else it's just going to be a huge mess, especially before they get berries, because then that berries like will stain your hands and stuff and get all over the place. All right, so when we're talking about perennials, nut sedge is hands down the worst. If you have nut sedge in your garden, and someone comes up and says, "Oh, there's nut sedge here," definitely, yeah. Yeah, that sucks. The nut sedge, there's like two different kinds of nut sedges. There's like golden and purple. The purple nut sedge, I think I actually was heard is like the number one worst weed in the world. But we don't. Luckily, I think we just have golden, nut sedge, which is still really bad. It's like number 17, the worst weed in the world. And it's basically, it looks like grass, but how you can really distinguish it is like the stem is like it's like a V shape. It's like a triangle, and grass is like a round, hollow, and this, so if you look at it and look at the stem, and there's like a triangle base to it, then this is nut sedge. And the problem with nut sedge, it's pretty easy to pull, but then it's got all these little tubers, and ribosomes and stuff. And when you pull them, it leaves the tubers, and then the tubers will grow new plants really quickly with more tubers. And it's just really hard. And the problem with this too is like if you have nut sedge, you don't want to rototill, because when you rototill, you actually just mix up all them tubers all over the garden, and then you got a huge infestation of nut sedge. So if you have nut sedge, don't rototill. Do permaculture, or like doing the non-till, or at least like I'll show you some examples of different ways to kind of get them out. But basically what you want to do is you want to try to pull them by hand, and then try to get the roots out, and then try spend some time getting all the little tubers as well. If you do this, you may have to do this like 10 or 20 times throughout the year. But if you keep on doing this like once a year, and whenever they come up, you keep on pulling them and trying to get their tubers, eventually you should be able to remove them. But it could take a lot, especially if it's a huge outbreak. I mean, that's why a lot of people will just use herbicides, pretty toxic herbicides. So you don't want to use that while growing vegetables. So if you're going to do that, just take a little time off. And then but some people will try to just they'll sheet mulch it, put cardboard down, and then that kind of robs them of the energy from the sun. They'll still grow for a while, but the hope is like eventually they'll die, but then the tubers can last for a really long time. So then when you pull the cardboard up, you kind of have to do it a couple times, let the new round of tubers grow up, then sheet mulch it, smother them, they'll die, and like do that for a couple rounds. But there's actually, while I was researching this, there's actually a lot of people have had success with agricultural molasses. So I'm actually going to play this video of Black Gumbo, of them using that as an experiment.
Man, I've been working hard to get some weeds out of here. We're going to try a weeding experiment. This garden bed of mine has been weed bound with nut sedge. We call it nut grass, but the stuff's really taken over. I have heard that To kill this stuff, you have to smother it and kill it root, nut, runner, rhizome, leaves, and all. And it has to do with the way the plant grows. This is a big problem here. This is nut grass, nut sedge, and it is pervasive. It networks, as you can see, and it takes over. So in order to kill nut grass, you have to not just pull the roots, because it spreads underground by these rhizomes. It has little networks connected by a fibrous root system, as you can see, connected to these little nuts, and that's hence the name, nut grass. And these little nuts themselves can sprout whole new plants, and they're very difficult to kill. Any little bit of this plant left in your garden will continue to grow and spread, and they're incredibly difficult to get rid of. The points are incredibly sharp. They can come up through mulch, through plastic, and yeah. Now this is a quintessential nut grass root system right here. You see the nut, from the nut grow these fibrous runners, and they sprout a plant. They sprout another plant. You can see as it goes, they just come up everywhere. And if you pull the weed, the nut as an anchor in the soil breaks off, and the nut stays down there. And down in this little nut here is all kinds of sugars and energy. All that energy in there. It's a sweet, sugary, starchy tuber, and all that energy in there will need to be depleted over time. You pull up all these weeds, or you smother them, they're going to grow until they deplete all of that in there. So what I'm going to do here is try to get out some of the biggest networks of nut grass by using my fork to loosen the soil and try to work these things out. Then we're going to treat with molasses, and I'll explain what I'm going to do there in a minute. So I'm going to work on some of this nut grass. Man, it's real hard to get this stuff out. So, certainly looks better now. But all in here, there are still little bits and pieces of nut sedge. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a product called agricultural molasses, and it's a sugar, and I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to put it on pretty heavily, and that's going to help kickstart and turn to high gear the biology in the soil that decays matter, and hopefully that will help decay what root matter is still down there. Because these nut sedges, I've heard, can come back a dozen times with the energy they store underground. Well, if we can destroy that energy underground by natural processes, then maybe we can get rid of these weeds. So I'm going to put the molasses down, and then I'm going to cover the whole bed, except for the beans that are growing in there. Hopefully they can make it through this. But if we lose the whole bed this year, that's okay to get rid of this nut grass. I'm going to cover it with cardboard, a heavy layer of cardboard to keep the light out. And cardboard is this nut sedge can go through most garden, what do you call that stuff? That fabric, that mulching fabric, that garden fabric. They can get through most of that stuff, but they can't get through cardboard because it's not porous. It's fine enough where they can't poke through it. So I'm going to lay down the cardboard to help smother this all the way through the heat of the summer. And I'm going to cover that cardboard with some Bermuda grass hay as mulch, just so it'll look decent. All right, so we've put down our cardboard now. We're going to wet it just to get it nice and floppy. And then we're going to cover it with our mulch. I've covered up some of the edges, hoping that we can suppress weeds there as well. Yeah, soak that real good.
All right. It kind of goes on for a while, this video. But then there's another video you have to watch another like 10, 20 minutes. And then you get to this another video where he actually comes back 6 months later and checks out the plot. And actually everything in this plot, there's no nut sedge whatsoever. But you could see like outside, like on those little center blocks that where he didn't, put molasses in and didn't cover it, that there was nut sedge coming out of that. So he was actually successful in eliminating all the nutsedge in this area by basically increasing the amount of biology to break things down while suppressing like preventing the nutsedge from getting any sunlight to continue producing. So just one option if you have nutsedge. Hopefully you don't have nutsedge because it's terrible. All right, so let's move on to annual. So the last section was perennial. So and weeds that come back every year. These are annual ones that kind of that reseed themselves every year. Dead nettle. If you ever see like the like a purple field of weeds, this is dead nettle. It's really beautiful. It's easy to pull. It's easy to kind of control. It's not that bad. It's actually edible. You can mix it up with salad. I probably wouldn't eat a whole salad of dead nettle, but you can mix it up with normal salad. How you can tell it's dead nettle is it has a square stem, so it's in the mint family. So anything that has a square stem is in some type of mint. Wild mustard, definitely, yeah, definitely it's easy to pull. Just more about just like identifying it. Wood sorrel, super easy to pull. It's basically like clover. It doesn't compete that much, and you can actually eat it. It's got a little sour taste to it. I'll put it in my water bottles and stuff. It'll make it my water kind of like a lemonade kind of thing. Just don't eat too much of it because it's got that oxalic acid that just upset your stomach. Ground ivy, easy to pull. Yeah, pretty, square stem. So it's in the mint family. Bitter cress, yeah, again, it's easy to pull. You just got like big tap roots. You just want to make sure anything that's got a tap root, make sure you actually get the whole tap root out, or if you leave a little section, it's just going to regrow itself. All right, so those were spring ones. These are more warm weather ones, annual ones to keep the head out. Prickly lettuce, super easy to pull, identify. Lamb's quarter. So lamb's quarter is a good thing to identify. I actually let lamb's quarter grow because it's like one of the most nutritious things that your garden will grow. A lot of these weeds are really, really nutritious. It's kind of like a spinachy kind of thing. You could saute it. You can eat it raw in a salad. But yeah, lamb's quarter is pretty great. It doesn't compete that much. I mean, it'll get kind of big if you let it grow, but yeah, it's not too bad. Morning glory, yeah, this is something that they're still selling. Morning glory, like seeds and stuff. Morning glory is an invasive, so yeah, you definitely want to kind of stay away from that. And if you do see it growing, if someone else planted it and it's still growing, definitely try to identify it and remove it. Bindweed, it's in very similar to morning glory. It's just like any kind of it's an it's an invasive weed that that grows in vines. Bermuda grass. So this is another one where you got to be careful. Like smothering works really well because it's got those ribosome roots, and if you don't remove the whole thing, it will regrow itself. So that's why you want to spend some time with Bermuda grass, like pulling it out and then like digging out the roots as well. Or if you have some bad Bermuda grass, maybe you just want to smother it. For like it's not as bad as nutsedge. So maybe smother it for a while, and then hopefully that will take care of it. Purslane. So this is a fantastic one. This is actually, if you're looking for omega fatty acids, this plant has the most omega fatty acids out of any plant that I'm aware of. It's really nutritious. It doesn't compete that much. So, I mean, I let it grow and then I'll just pull off the leaves. They're kind of succulent, like, they're not the greatest tasting one, but I mean, you can saute them, you can mix them in salads and stuff. And they're just super, super nutritious. So this is one of those, like, it's definitely one of those good weeds. Crabgrass, again, easy to pull, not so bad. Broadleaf, or plantain. So this is not the fruiting plantain. This is a different type of plantain. They're not aggressive. They're not going to really take over. You can pull them if you need to. But one thing that's really nice about it, especially in DC, because we got all those like terrible tiger mosquitoes, they actually makes a really great solve, where if you get bit by a mosquito and you're itchy, you can actually, you don't want to eat this stuff, but you can chew a leaf in your mouth for a little bit and then spit it out and put that, on your mosquito bite. And I swear it takes the itch away super quickly. It's pretty awesome. Devil's weed, datura. It kind of looks like eggplant when it first comes out, but yeah, it's completely, it's really poisonous. It has these crazy spiker balls. As soon as you identify one of these, pull it out because it'll get pretty big. Ragweed, it's another summer weed that's easy to identify, easy to pull. So these are all the edible ones out there. So a lot of these I would recommend actually leaving a little bit. Maybe a corner, a small corner of your garden or something with it. Don't let it take over your garden. But Personal and lamb's quarters, for sure. These two are some of the healthiest plants that you'll have in your garden. And then basically the last section we're going to talk about is just some basic prevention with weeds. Like I said, the biggest thing is just like pulling the weeds, really just being able to identify them and being able to pull them. But, there's some tricks, especially if if you have a couple weeks, where if it starts to warm up and you're not ready to plant, some people will, till up their garden, especially tilling. Tilling is like a great way for weeds to, that are buried to come back up. So that's why another advantage of non-till methods is you're not constantly, because some weeds can stay for years in your soil. Sometimes there's this burning tool. It's like this like blowtorch that's made for farmers. I mean, that's like the only way to really kill some seeds is to like burn them. But one way you could do it is you could just till your garden, water it, and let it just sit, for a couple weeks, let the weeds grow up, then pull all those weeds, and then, do that a couple times, retill, let the new weeds come up, pull all those, and then just do that a couple times, and then you should have have very low amount of weeds, seeds left in your garden. Mulching. We talked a lot about mulching already, but this like prevents, new weeds, from coming into your garden or or growing. Depending, most mulch, you'll still have some weeds, but it will significantly reduce the amount of weeds that you would normally have if you just had exposed soil. And same with white clover. That's why I use white clover like in the aisles of all mine. I used to use cardboard with wood chips, but now I just use white clover because it just once it establishes itself, it will outcompete most weeds. So you don't have to worry about weeding that middle aisles, and it's a nitrogen fixer, so it's bringing nitrogen to your garden. Garden covers, if you just don't want to do any weeding, think about different, landscape fabric or this like corn plastic stuff. It's a great way to, you don't have to think about it at all. I mean, you may want to think about drip irrigation and things like that. Landscape fabric, the water will, you just have to water it more, but it will seep through. But this stuff, you definitely have to have drip irrigation if you want to use the corn plastic. But the problem with weed barriers is like the weeds do still grow into them, and then it's like super hard to pull up. So just a heads up. Cover crops, if you're not, if you have some exposed soil and you're not going to use it, in the summer, throw some buckwheat in there. It'll grow really quickly and it will keep any weeds from coming in. And then winter, having different kinds of cover crops, during the end of the year will prevent any kind of seeds from being planted in the end of the year. And we already talked a lot about cover crops and tilling them and all that stuff, cutting them down, chopping them up, let them decompose for a couple weeks in your garden, then planting it, and then you just have the most amazing soil. And then like different kinds of treatment. So again, like the easiest one is just like try to weed, once or twice a week. Do it on a dry day. If you do it on a wet day, you may be pulling it, and if you drop it, it can reseed it. The roots can reattach itself if it's wet. But if it's dry and you pull it, it's going to die. You can compost weeds, like some of this stuff, like ribosomes, like some of the crabgrass and nut sedge. You better have a really great compost pile that gets really hot. If not, I would just trash that stuff. But most weeds, as long as it's not gone to seed, you can compost. Like smothering, doing some kind of sheet mulching. We'll get a lot of Bermuda grass or nut sedge or things like that. Solarization we talked about, kind of, heat up your soil, will kill a lot. The main thing is don't let the seeds, don't let them go to seed, because a lot of these, weeds that when they go to seed, there's like 1,000 seeds on them and they just, shoot that all over the place. So you want to have a pretty consistent, weeding schedule. So I would try to weed once a week. Don't let them go to seed, and eventually after a while, you're going to get a handle of it. And then you want to think about, what kind of tools. Everyone's got a different preference for tools. I mean, if you don't mind getting on the ground or bending on your back, there's a lot of great hand, weeders, like this Cape Cod one or a Korean hand hoe. But if you have some back issues or you don't like bending over all the time, think about long tools. We used to do this thing where we go out to the Radix farm, and she had like it's now Owl's Nest Farm, but she had all kinds of tools, and we can try them all out. And you really need to spend some time, trying to find out which tool works best with your body. Which one can you use for a while and not feel sore or start hurting in certain parts of your body. So it's a good idea to kind of try out. Like these are all great, tool suppliers. If you want to order them, but you can get tools in most garden centers as well. But you think about, I really like the scuffle hoe. If you got a lot of area, it's got a triple blade on it, and you just kind of scuffle it, through as you're walking through your garden. Or same with like this stirrup hoe. These dandelion weeders are really great, so you don't have to like you can get to the bottom of the taproot. You don't have to like dig up this huge hole. You can just shove this thing down and it can pop it right out. Yeah, there's all different kinds, wheat wheel hoes and stuff like that, to think about. Main thing is that you want to try out some tools, and like if it's hurting you, try out different ones. Especially like I said, if you have any back issues, do long tools so you don't have to bend over. It's really nice if you can actually stand straight and weed while you're standing straight. But if you don't mind getting on the ground, also if you want more precision, then think about like one of these Korean hand hoes or something like that. All right, so that is the class. I could definitely stick around for a little while if anyone has any questions, but feel free to jump off whenever, and I'll see you next week. So let's see a couple questions. So Jody says, squirrels dig up a lot of my containers. They've wiped out a couple plantings of seeds. What works well to get rid of them? So that's actually, I believe next class, we're going to have a whole class on, we're going to talk a lot about mammals. So we'll talk about a lot of things with squirrels, but from what I can remember right now, there's a couple different things. Squirrels are awful. Squirrels and deer are like the two worst mammal pests in this area. Like hot pepper flakes, brushing in hot pepper flakes. I mean, you got to reapply it once a week, but I mean, they hate, that stuff. For sure. A lot of times like feed, you can capture, them with have a heart cages, but they're very territorial. So if you remove one, a new family is going to come in oftentimes. So sometimes there's like, there's feeders that you can actually feed them away from your garden. As long as you keep them full, they're not going to really, be, scavenging. So if you, there's a lot of squirrel feeders, that you can have. I mean, that's always runs the risk of actually attracting more squirrels though. So you gotta have, there's no perfect solution for, squirrels. Cages, we're going to talk about how to build cages next week. That's like, if you can't get rid of, that's definitely a good way. Like these like sensor sprays you can set up where if they get close to, your garden, they'll actually shoot, a spray of water and it'll scare them away. Pheromone sprays, which you have to reapply, but there's like synthetic coyote urine and stuff. But you can also go barbershops and just pick up some hair and spread that around, and that may, I mean, it works